My name is Matthew Banbury. I'm the Ops Director at Pioneer Selection. We're a manufacturing recruitment company, mostly in perm, and we've got about 50 staff. We decided to invest in data quality. In the beginning, we were migrating from an old database onto Bullhorn, and we were quite conscious that we had a number of issues in the business. One of them was potentially poor candidate and client journeys, and also we had some kind of infighting internally, mostly over ownership. In addition to that, we really had no true understanding of what our assets were as a business. So how many we had hundreds of thousands of candidates in the database, but how many of them were actually individual candidates and how many were duplicates. Same with our contacts, and we just didn't really know what usable data was. We began this probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now. So if you're starting at the beginning, that's a massive reason to look into that, getting that clean data set. If you're already down the road with acquiring technology in your business, data rules is kind of the thing that will take you to the next level. If you're already using an automation tool, the reason for that is that it can actually span an automation or a rule against every single record type in your system. So you could find a contact that had a job X amount of months, years ago, that reached a particular stage of the interview process, like an advanced interview stage, that we currently don't have any live opportunities, trying to reapproach that client, and there's no notes on the system of a particular type identifying that person is that contact is a lapsed one, and something we should definitely be looking to revisit. Same with candidates. You could actually identify candidates that reached a certain stage. A big concept in the market is silver medalist. How can we make money from placing the candidates that came second or third in the recruitment process? Using this, you could actually identify people that reached an advanced stage that we've got a good amount of data on, that are still quite active, that we could then look to go and place into another job. Improving data quality in our business has just taken us to the next level. You can start off with just having really clean data. Obviously it does look nice, but apart from satisfying your OCD, it's just there's no real benefit to your business. However, once you've got that in place, that's when you can begin to automate. So setting scheduled rules or automations. This is the biggest thing to hit the recruitment sector probably since the internet. Once you've got that really solid base, you can send off automations. We as a business probably have about 300 automations running. You can use it to plug into analytics platforms. So any kind of reporting that you've got in you're using to identify productivities and efficiencies, where are the bottlenecks in your business. Without really clean data, you won't be able to get the right answers to the questions you want to ask of your system. Obviously our candidates and our clients get a better experience, so there's no more embarrassing situations where we're emailing a contact from two different email addresses, and they're replying to one and then another person's contacting them the same day and asking them the same question. So this has a massive effect on our on our reputation and our brand. So the way we use Kyloe DataTools is just for a number of things, really. So probably first and foremost, we use it to merge duplicate records. So we can do this, at scale. So for example, if I go on there once a week, or I can actually schedule it just to happen on its own. But if there's 100 new duplicates, I can literally click one button, go away from that, and that'll just run in the background for me and make sure we're constantly on top of our duplicate records. We use it to, for example, if we identify a bulk list of records that are missing a particular piece of data, and we can actually export that data, or create an automation to go and reach out to those candidates or even contacts potentially, to understand if they can give us that data back into our system that enables us to contact them again in the future. We use it to, actually, it's quite a clever one, we actually use it to read CVs. So this is actually the only product in the market that I'm aware of that can live read CVs, when we can actually set up your own Booleans and then use that to assign categories based on those Boolean searches. We use a lot with date fields. So if you're going to use any kind of automation, or you want to even create internal process around when I'm going to choose to contact candidates or contacts. An example would be if I've got a candidate that's on the system that appears to be active because they're, in submissions and we've got notes, but their CV is, let's say, over 2 years old, we might want a refresh of that CV. So we can tag when that last CV date was received and then create a schedule or an automation to actually go and reach out to that candidate to ask for a new CV. Just means we're constantly updating our data. We also use it to track when the candidate maybe last applied to a job, when they were last sourced. We can use it to find records that we need to reparse where they've hasn't updated fully into the system, set GDPR consents, or identify records where we don't have consent. We can reach out to them. I mean, I could go on for a very long time about this, but just in data rules alone, we've got at least 50 automated rules running 24/7, making sure that we're constantly identifying gaps in our data and then using automation to fill those gaps. So the first thing we did with DataTools, it's got to be about the duplicates. You just got to get them out of your system. So, depending on how old your data is, that could be quite a big task. And incredibly manual one, unless you're going to use a tool like DataTools. So that's the first thing we did with it. We then looked to identify. Effectively, we were trying to have a spring clean. So I wanted all the duplicates out. I wanted to clear all the records where we had, just not enough data at all. For example, just the name and a surname, and then no contact details, no CV. So we used it to create lists. To either collect data that was missing from candidates we could reach out to, or just to get rid of the stuff that we were, that was just sitting there and making our database look big. It was just something that we could brag about how we had 1 million candidates, but if 300,000 of them are rubbish, then they just need to go in the bin. So that was our kind of first experience. Second part is probably something around. Well, it's probably the most clever thing is that until AI replaces people and their ability to match to jobs, and we don't just consistently rely on running Boolean searches, a much better way to actually match candidates to jobs or jobs to candidates is through assigning categories or tagging skills, etc. So really clever feature within DataTools is you can actually use it to read the CV description on a record, and actually then go and look at if, for example, a candidate has all of these skills in their CV and they're in this area, I could actually code them into a particular talent pool for an area. I could put them into a talent pool for a vertical, or I could just set them for a particular category or a skill. You can also use it for coding your contacts. So you could actually use it to identify contacts that have hired for particular types of jobs, and then you could code that contact to say that, for example, this contact hires Java developers. Based on all of the legacy data that's in your system. So when you're then going out to try and market candidates, you can actually create your own BD lists because you know who the contacts are that would recruit for the type of the type of candidate that you're working with. Data quality is probably the top priority within our business. We can talk about wanting to do more BD and be more efficient and acquire more candidates, but with data for us, our database is where everything begins. Everything's plugged into our database, whether it's bits of technology, whatever we use to go and acquire candidates. Effectively our recruiters are plugged into our database as well. So if that data isn't operating to a really, really high standard, then everything else that relies on that data just has to start to break down. So just our billers, if the data in the system isn't accurate, that a candidate's active and we haven't got the information, it's going to be very difficult for them to place it. If we're going to use automation to go out and reach out to candidates at scale, if the data is wrong, we're just going to go out there and potentially embarrass ourselves in front of the candidate or the client because we're going to be reaching out to them based on poor information. So it's absolutely paramount for us. Where is it go? Automation is quite a big thing at the moment, but AI is obviously coming down the road. So if you've got really, really good data, you're going to be able to leverage that as well. So what are the things that people are doing with AI at the moment? We can be using it to curate job adverts, deliver interview questions so that people, potentially unskilled recruiters can still actually screen candidates effectively for you. We're using it to write BD emails. So we can, if somebody's not particularly, good at writing content to put out on an email to a candidate or potentially a client, we can actually use it for that as well. Kyloe's actually got a good product coming out shortly called AI Assist, which will actually be able to help people with that, which will just operate as like a card on a candidate or contact record. But effectively, if you don't have really good data quality, all of the cool tools that are coming out down the line, you'll buy them and you won't be able to use them. And if you don't use them, as a business, you'll be left behind. So how do we manage data quality in the past? It actually pains me to think about this. It was a horrendous exercise whereby we took, between 20, depending on how long we've been doing it, 20 to 50 recruiters. We sat them down for 2 weeks before Christmas, and we had them manually go and find records in the system that didn't have a postcode, find the CV and copy that data into it. We've done this thing, whether that be postcodes, phone numbers, deleting duplicates. And looking back on it, at the time, it was just what we did every year. It was the norm. But it would be a very painful exercise for me to actually calculate the lost revenue from having, 20 to 50 recruiters not going out and billing, and also just the actual cost to achieve that, that result in just the actual time that we had to pay people to do that task. It's an incredible, paying a very, very expensive recruiter to sit there and do an admin task is frankly ludicrous. So we didn't have a choice at the time, but now we do. And luckily the Kyloe product has removed that from our business. So even if I don't work it out, I know that at the moment I've got at least 2 weeks a year times 50 recruiters where we don't have to do that task.